We are drawing towards the end of our program, and so I would like to introduce our last speaker of the evening, Ms. Gail Anderson, and she will share some of her thoughts and some closing remarks. Ms. Gail Anderson directs interfaith and ecumenical programming at the Minnesota Council of Churches. She helped organize a coalition of more than 30 organizations for the event, Minnesota Standing Together, a multi-faith service for respect. It was held this past September at Central Lutheran Church in Minneapolis. More than 400 people, including 50 community faith leaders, stood together with our Muslim neighbors to call for an environment of respect, peace, and tolerance for all faith traditions. With the Muslim American Society, she organizes Taking Heart, a program designed to bring Muslims and Christian neighbors together. In addition, Ms. Anderson is involved in hosting as well as co-facilitating the Twin Cities Interfaith Network. She's a frequent speaker and panelist for interfaith programs, and in 2009, she was the recipient of Building Bridges, an award from the Minnesota Islamic Resource Group. Her newest project is Taking Roots, and it was created to facilitate interfaith understanding as well as to welcome and assist refugees who come to Minnesota without any connections to our communities. Ms. Anderson earned her master's degree in theology from the United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. She's been an award-winning television producer and president of a corporate communications company. Please welcome Gail Anderson.
Good evening, and thank you so much to the Niagara Foundation and the Phosphorus Dialogue Association for having me here today. And I want to thank all of you for coming to an interfaith event. You may think of this as an isolated thing, or some of you come, I see some familiar faces, you're at a few of these things. But I really think that this is a movement, and you're part of a movement, and it's a very important movement that's happening in our country right now and worldwide, where people of different faith traditions are coming together. I work at the Minnesota Council of Churches, as Jamila said, and that organization is made up of 24 different denominational groups in Minnesota, representing nearly 1 million Christians. And I have a job, my title, Director of Unity and Relationships, which I love. I hope if I ever take another job, I can take that title with me. And my job is just that, building relationships. I do that in many ways. I convene meetings and events. I bring people together in large groups and small groups. I just go out and have coffee with people. And I attend prayer services and worship services and interfaith events like this. At one time, the person who held my job would have spent most of his or her time working within the Christian community. It comes down from different councils of churches, World Council of Churches, called Faith and Order. It was really important that Christians got along. But right now, I spend most of my time working with people outside the Christian tradition. So why would an organization like the Minnesota Council of Churches, representing the dominant religious tradition here in the state, have a full-time person on staff designated to build relationships with other faith traditions? Now, I think part of that comes from our own Christian tradition. As Christians, we are called to be in relationship with people of other faith traditions. We're called to offer hospitality to the stranger. The parable of the Good Samaritan illustrates that. We're called to love God and neighbor, as has been mentioned already. Jesus calls this the whole of the law and the prophets. And loving people means respecting them and listening to them and treating them the way we would want to be treated. We're also called to be peacemakers. In the passage in the Bible called the Sermon on the Mount, one of the most beloved in the Bible, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Pacemakers, did I say pacemakers? Let's start that again. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. So indeed, if we are children of God, then we are all one family. There was a time in the United States when being a good family was almost synonymous with being a Christian family. But now we're living in a much more pluralistic community, and we can no longer judge what a good family looks like by looking at one tradition. I don't want to discount what our neighbors' family structures and traditions are. And in fact, many of us now have more than one tradition represented right in our family, certainly in our extended family. So a good family can't be thought of as a Christian family in this country anymore. And on top of that, there's a lot of challenges facing our families today. Think of the ways that we receive our wisdom. Instead of from our elders, like it's done in traditional society, our children are receiving their wisdom from the media, from internet, from YouTube, from Facebook, from each other. And some people will see this as a threat. And when we're threatened, we can tend to pull back and crawl into what feels like familiar and see anything new or different as potentially destroying those things which we cherish. So we hear this right now in our country. Some say that in order to preserve the family in these times, we need to go back to our Christian way of being. Or maybe sometimes they expand to say Judeo-Christian. But it discounts all the other ways of being family and the wisdom that comes to us from very many traditions. They say we need to guard against any new ways and strange ways coming into our society. And then another thing I always want to remind people, and I say anybody's heard me speak has heard me say this, there are very, very strong forces in our world who are doing their best to make us suspicious and fearful of each other. And they're doing it for profit, their own profit. And we have to work really hard in groups like this and in other groups to counter their efforts. But always, if we know each other and we build relationships with each other and we come to understand each other and respect each other's traditions, we can truly live together as neighbors and as families. And we can learn lessons from each other. And just tonight, I'm taking notes. From the Jewish tradition, there's the lesson in the importance of the family meal. A lot of us have family meals, but to look at it from the Jewish tradition and find out why is it so important there and what can we take from that. And from Christianity, the idea that families may be made and they may be non-traditional and they're created by love, as Jesus said, those who love God, they are my brothers and sisters. And from Islam, the idea of respect between spouses. These are all things we have in all our traditions, but they're really strong in certain traditions. And it was mentioned in the Catholic tradition, marriage is a sacrament. You don't have to believe marriage is a sacrament to say, why do Catholics say that? Why do they believe that? And what can I learn from why they think that's so important? And it can strengthen all our families in that way. So by being comfortable and accepting each other's traditions, we can work together to strengthen all our families. Not one way of being family, not one tradition of being family, but all of ours. So I want to thank you for coming out and being at this interfaith gathering and taking part in a movement of where we are working together to understand and get to know each other, which can serve to make our communities and our families even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. And I have just been made aware that we have Tom Smith, and he's the Chief of Police for St. Paul. Is Tom still here? Would you like to say a few words, Tom? We're truly going with the flow tonight.
You really put me on the spot. I'm very humbled and honored to be with all of you here this evening. This is a second opportunity for me to be here. It's so great to see so many groups of people together. It's a big thing. As your chief of police, at least in St. Paul, I have 3 responsibilities. And I teach it to my officers, and I talk about it in the communities. And we've heard a lot of common themes tonight, but the most common is family. And so for us, it's to keep the peace, promote public safety, and enforce the law. And I see some young people here this evening. But if we do number 1 and 2 really well, keep the peace, promote public safety, then we don't have to enforce the law because we all work so well together. A quick story. I was at a grade school in St. Paul just 2 weeks ago, and I was with a bunch of second graders, and it's always great because they ask these great questions. They're unbiased, and they're just going to throw things out to you. So I was there, and first hand goes up, and somebody says, "Is it really hard being the chief of police?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "Is it really fun being the chief of police?" I said, "Sometimes." "Is it real dangerous?" "Yes, sometimes." And then this little girl, and I remember her name because we all had name tags on, just like this. Her name was Cindy. She was in the back, and she said, "Do you get to boss people around at work?" And I go, "Well, I try not to, but yes, I give directions." And she goes, "What about at home?" I said, No, not at all. I am not the chief at home. I've had an opportunity to travel a lot of different places in the world, and just real quickly, we have vast oceans that separate our continents, but we have so many things that are so similar. All of us here have friends in different parts of the world, and you know what? What's most important is family. And I really believe that dialogues like this bring so many people together. Spread the words that you have here this evening. Spread the words as you go out amongst your family and friends and the businesses and the jobs that you have, because it truly makes, at least in Minnesota and right here in St. Paul, in Minneapolis, very safe places to live for our families. And I'll leave you with this quote. "In the end, we'll be judged by our standard of life, not by our standard of living. By our measure of giving, not by our measure of wealth. And my friends, the most important, by our simple goodness, not by our seeming greatness." Good night and God bless.
Thank you, Tom. At this time, I would really like to thank all of our speakers. You have given generously of your time. You've given your heart in sharing your viewpoints from your tradition. So we really appreciate you coming here and sharing all of this with us. And last, I would like to invite Kairat to come up and say a few words. Kairat is the president of the Bosphorus Dialogue Association from the University of Minnesota, and he is a PhD chemistry candidate. Please welcome Kairat.
Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished guests, on behalf of Bosphorus Dialogue Association, I would like to thank all of you to come on to third annual of Abrahamic Traditions. It was a great privilege for us to have you here tonight and to share a meal. We thank you for giving up your time and delighting us with your presence. I would like to mention about recent and upcoming activities. Bosphorus Dialogue Association is proud to continue the interfaith dialogue dinners, talking series, discussion groups, coffee hours and cooking classes, Turkish classes, and several cultural events, including summer picnics. We are also planning a special event for upcoming Mother's Day. To be able to receive updates, I strongly urge you to fill out the contact info sheets, which can be found on the tables. Thank you for coming.
And now it's perhaps the most important time of the evening. Although we've had many words of wisdom, I think what's necessary is on the ground level for people interacting with people. And so we have tea and Turkish desserts over here, and we invite you all to come together, to share together, and to discuss what was important for you tonight and what you heard, what was on your heart, what speaks to you. Thank you so much for coming. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, and peace. Thank you.